All right, so here's the plan. I'm headed into the city today for a little bit of work, a nice change of environment from the studio, and you're coming along with me. Now, a big shout out to Insta360 for sending over the Ace Pro 2, which is what we're filming on right now, but more on that a little bit later. All right, let's get packed up. Okay, so good news, bad news. It looks like the weather was supposed to be sunny, but it might rain off and on throughout the day. But the good news is I have my good friend Manny with me. Hey guys. And Manny's just here to tag along to see the entire process. So why do I do these remote days? Don't get me wrong, the studio and my home office are really great spaces, but sometimes it's good to get a nice change of pace. And you'd actually be surprised how much of a difference it can make in your creativity. Like for me, I've come up with ideas in the most random of spots. The other thing is that it gives me an excuse to try out some food spots. I mean, I've gotten so many recommendations from friends, but they all seem to be in Toronto. All right, so we're headed on the road. We're gonna get a little bit of work done in the morning, then we're gonna break for lunch, and then a little bit more work in the afternoon. But first, we're gonna grab some coffee. Okay, so now that we're settled, I want to talk a little bit about this camera because calling it an action cam, I think, is a little bit of a lie. See, most people think with an action cam, it's about, jumping out of airplanes or mounting it to a helmet and capturing something exciting. But I feel like this can do a lot more than what most people expect. Like for me, when I'm shooting, I fall into one of two categories. Usually I'll use my phone, which is the camera that I have in my pocket. Or if I want to capture something a little bit more detailed or with a little bit more color, I'll use my DSLR. And I think that the Ace Pro 2 kind of inherits the best of both worlds. It's got a boxy design, quite a bit thicker than an iPhone, but it's still compact, still pocketable, and it's still got a solid build coming in a weight of just 178 grams. Now, that's pretty average for the industry. Some people might even say on the heavier side, but then you see what it can do. It records up to 8K and shoots true 4:3 aspect ratio. So if you want to grab vertical or horizontal content, you still have the flexibility without losing any quality. And then the colors look amazing right out of the camera. Insta360 actually co-developed this with Leica, and so you get those rich, consistent colors. And then as an added bonus, they actually have custom recipes that act like filters, so you can get that perfect look no matter what situation you're in. And then once you start using it, there are small features that make a big difference to the experience. So for example, there's a flip out screen that allows you to make sure that you're still in frame and it still maintains that IPX8 water rating. Or for example, the Explorer grip that sort of makes your camera feel like a DSLR. So it adds a cage around the camera to protect it, a handle for better grip overall, and then buttons that allow you to customize individual settings. It all seems like small stuff, but adds to the overall experience in a big way, and I think makes this camera feel less like an action camera and more like a professional camera. Okay, enough talk about the camera. So this morning, I'm gonna focus on responding to some emails, working on some website updates, and then get to some video ideas and video scripts a little bit later on. All right, I'll catch you in a bit. All right, so we just got done with the morning session and it was actually really productive. We made some updates to the website and it's a lot easier to find the links to the products that we show in our videos. And then I was able to get some script writing done, so there should be some pretty interesting content coming. So stay subscribed for that. But right now we're gonna go grab some food. Now, I don't necessarily know what is actually on the street, but we're gonna find something. Well, while we walk, let's talk a little bit more about this camera. Now, one of the things that makes an action camera is stabilization. And you can see here, I'm walking down the street and the footage looks pretty stable overall. Now, if you are shooting something with a bit more action or sports or something like that, you can always crank up the stabilization and it's gonna stay rock steady. Another big thing I wanted to talk about is ecosystem. And this is something that we kind of explored with the Explorer Grip earlier, but it's this idea that a company will make a core product and then build accessories around that product that really complement it. And an example of this is audio. Like, don't get me wrong, the Ace Pro 2 has pretty good onboard mics, but right now, if you can see, I'm using the Mic Air. And because both are made by Insta360, the mic is actually wirelessly connected to the camera. So there's no additional cables or receivers that I need, and it just sort of works. And one additional benefit is if I turn on the mic, it'll actually turn on the camera automatically, which is really convenient. Now, there is one other thing that's really cool about this camera, and it's the fact that it supports interchangeable lenses. So Insta360 sent me over their close-up and wide-angle lenses, and I've been playing around with them because they allow me to get all sorts of different angles. And what's really cool is that the camera will actually adapt its settings depending on the lens that's actually connected. All right, so Manny's been looking for a lunch spot and we really haven't found anything. So we're actually gonna head a few streets over and see if we can find something to eat. I'll catch you guys in a bit. All right, so we just finished up lunch. Funny enough, we actually ended up at the same spot that we started out with this morning. So we were at Sam James Coffee, and then right next door, they have a General Assembly pizza. So right now, we're just gonna go grab our stuff from the car, and we're gonna head over to the second spot so we can get a little bit more work done. Okay, so coffee number 2. This is Moretti's Cafe at the Soho. So let's take a drink. Honestly, not bad, like pretty good coffee. Okay, so for the afternoon session, we're gonna be focused on a little bit more product development. Now, it's not something that we've talked a whole lot about on the channel, but you know, in 2024, we actually released our first product, which was a valet tray, Rest. I'll leave links to that down in the description, but we're focused on new product releases for 2026. And so I wanted to walk through sort of my process of designing products. So the first thing I try to do is identify a problem. For me, I like to optimize my workflow, so figuring out where those friction points are is super important. And oftentimes that means researching competitors and competing products and figuring out what they're good at and what they're not so good at, and then figuring out a niche from that. And then I'll move to something like Pinterest, which has been really helpful in finding ideas and shapes that I can play with that inspires what I'm trying to make. It's also an opportunity to see what sort of materials and colors I want to work with, and then see how that fits into the rest of the product line. Like for me, materials is sort of a sensory thing that really influences how we interact with things. Like take for instance, the finish on this MacBook. It's an anodized aluminum, but Apple has picked a very specific finish and a very specific color, and that has a huge impact in terms of how people perceive their products. Then there's the practical side. Like some materials are easy to work with, but cost a lot more. So I'm always looking at different manufacturers and materials to figure out what is the best material I can use without it being overly expensive. And then I usually move on to sketching, which isn't really my strong suit, but it's about being really iterative and trying different things so I can see what sort of form I want to make. And once I find a design that I like, I'll usually hop into something like Figma or Illustrator and get a proper design made with dimensions and measurements. And that way I can take that design and go to a 3D modeler. And then once the model is made, I can actually get that printed so I can test it in real life. And as I said, the process is iterative, so I'll keep going through that process till I find something that ultimately solves my problem. All right, so enough talk. I'm actually gonna throw in some music and get started. right, so we just left Moretti's Cafe. Actually got quite a bit done in the afternoon. Now, there is one more thing I want to check out about this camera, and it has to do with the photography. Now, you wouldn't expect an action camera to shoot good photos, but this camera is actually not that bad. So you've got a 50 megapixel sensor, so you've got plenty of resolution if you want to crop in. And I was actually really surprised by the sharpness of the photos themselves. Like, there's tons of detail there, and if you're shooting in RAW, it'll give you a lot more flexibility with the colors. Of course, if you don't want to shoot in RAW, you still have access to those Leica color profiles, so you can get really good color right out of the camera. And then Insta360 also sent over their pocket printer, which at first I was hesitant to use, but honestly is really cool. So basically you take a picture, connect the camera to the printer, and then it'll basically print it out as a Polaroid. It's really cool because you can see the entire process as it happens because it prints each layer on its own. And as you can see, the prints themselves aren't really that bad. I think it's really cool that Insta360 even made something like this because it expands the possibilities of what you can do with a camera like this. All right, so we're pretty much wrapped up for the day, and I think it's gonna rain, so let's head back to the studio. All right, finally back at the studio. It was actually a really productive day. Got a lot of stuff done in terms of product development, as well as script writing, and working on some updates for the website. And then also got to play around with the Ace Pro 2. And I actually have some thoughts on this. I think calling this an action camera sort of doesn't do justice to the entire design. Like, yes, it's compact, it's pocketable, and it's got a rugged design, but then it has those pro-level features that you'd find on a professional camera that just sort of expands the ways in which you can use it. And then on top of that, it has an ecosystem of accessories that not only complement the camera, but I'd say enhances what you can do with it. And that's what makes this so great. It's a true grab-and-go camera, but still leaves plenty of room to push it when you want to. If you're interested in the Ace Pro 2 or any of the accessories I showed today, including the Explorer grip or the printer, I'll leave links to all of that down below, and I'd encourage you to check out the rest of Insta360's lineup as they've got some really cool stuff. All right, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave me a comment down below in terms of what your favorite feature was. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.